Hey, everybody, welcome into this amazing Zoom room. Let me just say something to you. The Zoom room on its own is nothing. It's just a blank space. What makes this room fascinating is every day, sometimes 10, 12 times a day, I have people that I don't know, I barely know, or I know a little, show up in this room with me. And we have an opportunity to get to know each other and pull out of each other who they are and what's going on. The whole intention I have in my presence in this room is to just love and accept people, to listen to them and hear them, and to acknowledge and validate them for what they're saying and who they are. In the world that we live in today, so often, people are not loved and accepted. People are not listened to and heard, and people are not acknowledged and validated. And so I want to have just one little corner of time, one little space in the moments of all space that exists, that people know that it's possible to do that. The way I find that happens is by having agendaless conversations. Conversations that have I don't need anything from somebody. I don't want anything from them. I just want to hear about them and care about them enough to love them. I should mention that this show is being sponsored by the book over my left shoulder, The Mosaic. The Mosaic's the perfect sponsor for what I'm doing, because when I finished The Mosaic, it told me to go out on the road and do this, but then COVID came and I wasn't able to. But the beauty of not being able to go out and do it is that I'm able now to talk to people on every continent on the planet through the Zoom room. And sometimes the connections, there might be scratchy sounds or there might be delays or something like that. But today I am talking with Neelam Tewar, and she's in India. And how beautiful is that we're talking, I'm in San Diego, she's in India, and we're having this conversation. So The Mosaic's a story about a boy who loses his parents 2 years apart on the same day. And when he asks the adults where his parents are, they tell him they're in a place called heaven. So he sets out in search of that place called heaven. But the people he meets are not the swamis and the gurus and the shamans and the priests and the medicine women and the Aborigines elders and the ministers and rabbis. He meets common, ordinary people. And in meeting those people, he wonders, why am I here? What are they going to show me about heaven? But in every single case, when he sits with them and listens to them tell him their story, what he realizes is the person he sees after them telling him their story is completely different than the person he saw when he came up. And it wasn't because the person changed, it was because his perception of them has changed. Wayne Dyer said years ago when we were sitting together, and then it became one of the sayings that he became known for. When you change the way you see the world you see changes. Perception is everything. When we see a person a certain way, we hold them bound by the way we see them. But when we allow them to tell us who they are, we suddenly see a whole different person, a whole different reality. It is with that pleasure and honor that I invite Neelam Tewar into this room. Neelam, how are you? Tell us how you're doing.
Well, thank you for having me, Daniel. And I'm doing good. Had the perfect day, actually. Got a lot of work done, but just at my own pace. You know, the feeling you have when you know that you have so much to do, and then somewhere you've learned the concept of sort of someone taught me this. It was it's a simple thought that stays in my mind. Slow down to speed up. And every time I feel like I'm speeding up, I just make sure that I take the time to slow down so that I'm not just doing this sort of unconscious, mindless effort into whatever it is that I'm creating. Even though I might have a lot of heart in what I do, of course, I'm heart-centered for sure. But so I slowed down today so that I could speed up.
So I want to immediately invite the listener into this conversation, and I want to ask you, how do you slow down to speed up? And I want the listener to think about that, and then we're going to ask you, Neelam. But I want the listener to think about Do you find yourself sometimes going so fast that you don't even know where you're going? And that if you would only slow down a little bit and get centered, that you might find the direction and be able to go quicker in a less amount of time to the place you're wanting to go, rather than running like a rat in a wheel. But Neelam, how do you do that? How do you slow down to speed up?
I I take a lot of time to myself, which basically means that anything that requires me to have more conversations than necessary, I say no to that immediately. I clear out my calendar. I give myself at least, this is just, I'm going to qualify it like this, but not everyone needs to do it this way. I give myself at least the first 5 to 6 hours of my morning, which are to myself. And then I'll determine if I'm doing an early start. Am I doing like a 5 a.m. or am I doing 8 a.m.? That means till it doesn't hit noon, I'm not going to open up space for anyone to communicate with me. It's all about what's going on with me. So it's a forced approach to go inward. I wouldn't call it forced. That's not the right word. I think it's a very intentional approach to go inward. And I also make sure I don't do certain things like post on social media during that time, or I won't access social media at all during that time. And then part of the slowing down process is to actually, create those pockets of space where you actually do nothing. And the second big part of it is to figure out the direction you're going in. Because for me, it's not just about, there's a lot of spiritual teaching out there that has been commercialized and teaches people to just let go, surrender. But there's another component to it. The act of letting go in itself is actually functional. It is action oriented. It's not about just sitting there and being a leaf, though you can, of course, no problem with that. But we're humans. We have the ability to channel our consciousness. That's why we're a bit different than a leaf, right?
Right.
Yeah, so not to say we're superior or anything of that sort. It's just that our faculties are different. And that means that if we're not directing ourselves in a manner in which we feel aligned to whatever it is that we're creating, especially I see this happening wonderfully. Like if you look at artists, poets, and writers from another century, they really had a deep understanding of what it meant to spend time with themselves, right? Like when Thoreau wrote about Walden, like what was he talking about? He was really talking about communing with yourself by way of being in nature.
I love that. And one of the things I find out, this is going to be a sort of a preamble to lob a question over the net to you to see what your thoughts of it are. Like, I find so many people work with the principle of letting go and releasing, but I find also so few people understand what it really means to receive. So it's great to let go and create an empty vessel, but then if you're not receiving what wants to be put into that vessel, what source wants to fill you up with, then you've prepared the banquet table, but you've left before you eaten the meal. And so what do you think it is? First of all, do you agree with that concept that a lot of people are able to let go, but few people are able to receive?
I think that's happening quite a bit. Like if you just look around at everything that's going on, whether it's receiving that's entrenched in entitlement, or it's receiving unless and until it comes in a certain way. Because if it's not done this way, then no, this is not what I asked for.
Right.
But truly, like you haven't asked right, baby. I don't know if that's the right way of looking at it, but I think that's where the overtone of gratitude comes into play. And it's yes. So to answer the first part of your question, absolutely. And you brought up a very good point about source, and the middle part of that letting go and receiving for me is to ask. And the asking is like, okay, please tell me what you want me to do here.
Yeah.
And I think I move at 1,000,000 miles an hour sometimes. I know it. I know people around me just watch me and are like, man, do you ever slow down? And I'm like, I actually do, believe it or not. I do.
Yeah.
I have to. Otherwise, I don't think I could output at that level or be of service at the level in which, I want to be. So just cutting out noise is very important, and understanding where your core values are, what your needs are. And I don't want to use those words as if, I'm reading out of a manual, but we all have different set of values and needs. Yeah. And one is to embrace that. And the second is to obviously ask for it. And when it shows up, and even if it doesn't show up in the way you were expecting it, ask better, rejigger, reframe, go back out there and do things in a way that are more specific. So that becomes very functional in terms of asking. And that means, that also means that the action you take to get there. So, you know, the Buddhists have the eight paths, right? So the right speech, the right action, the right, you know, intention, and all of it. I put a few things that almost everything I do against something of that sort, but it's 3 words that I use. I'll share it. I've actually never shared this openly, believe it or not.
I love it. I would love that.
Okay, so they're actually Sanskrit/Hindi words, and they start with the letter N. So it's niyati, niyam, and niti. And there's Neelam also, but that's not about that. So niyati is your sight, like meaning your intention. Niyam means, the way I look at it is rule. Niyam actually means rules, but I look at it as like your founding principles, your you know, discipline is probably the word. Like, you know, what the Stoics describe as, yes, like that equanimity in all situations. So what did I go over? Niyati, niyam, and niti. Niti is your intention. Like, what are you actually going after? Are you doing it with a purpose to just be self-serving? Or are you actually keeping a broader vision in play, even though there's something for you to gain?
I love that.
That makes sense.
And so what I want to, again, I want the readers, the listeners, I keep saying readers because I just read my book. I want to ask the listeners, what are the principles that you operate with? Look how beautiful Neelam was able to identify the 3 ways that she looks at everything she does in life. Do you have guidelines for you for how you live your life, or do you just live trying to catch up to the moment that you're living in? What a beautiful way to have an intentional life like that. I wanted to sort of go over something that went sort of quickly by, because I think it's a really important point, and I'd love to have a little conversation on it and see what you actually feel. They tell a story. When I was in seminary, they told a story about a man who died and went up to heaven. And he was greeted by the saint of heaven, who showed him around, gave him a tour. He wanted to show him where he was going to be the rest of his life. So he showed him all the different areas of heaven. And as they were walking, he took him to the heavenly junkyard. And in the heavenly junkyard, he said, look at all these things that we tried to give to people, but people didn't want them. And as they're walking by, the man says, well, hold everything. That's the most beautiful car I've ever seen. I can't believe you tried to offer that to somebody and they didn't take that. They didn't want that car. And the guide of heaven said to him, funny, out of all these things that you see, you would pick that one thing. That was the one thing we tried to give to you. And you said no. And he said, how is that possible? If I would have known you were giving that to me, I would have not only opened my arms, I would have opened 1,000 arms to receive it. And they said, yes, but all the time you were asking for a Volkswagen and we were trying to give you this spectacular car. And so we couldn't give it to you. We had to give you what you asked for. In that intention that you're talking about, because I don't think you're talking about asking for a Volkswagen when the world wants to give you something more. Define that for people a little bit. How do you ask for, because there was a statement that you made, and I just want to be clear that I understand it, that if you're asking for something and you don't get what you want, you're not asking well enough. Maybe it's not that you're not asking well enough. Maybe you're being given what you need rather than what you want. Your thoughts on that?
Totally. I think in any situation, you're always given what you need. Sometimes it's not about a want. But I do think that if you're asking the right questions and you're setting your world, you know, your personal world, whether it's your career, your relationships, or whatever it is, with the right lens on it, then there's no way that typically you wouldn't get what you're after. So it's about the approach more than anything else. And also, I'm adding one more layer to this. It's also about patience and understanding that whenever we ask for something or whenever we make decisions or we're choosing from a certain state of consciousness and experience and what we have in front of us.
Yeah.
So it's not about just like, how should I put this? You can have the grander vision, but I think you have to stay in the game longer to get there. And I was just listening to something today by one of the Stoics that I've, one of the books I was reading. And he was talking about like the central idea of that, at the end of the day, you have to be able to realize that money is a component of everything, and that while Seneca was one of the richest men where he lived, he told people like that's not the thing that's going to fulfill you till the internal stuff is sorted out. So he's like, the things we all talk about these days, right? Like your external is not going to feed you. So how much more can you keep going inward constantly and constantly? And what I call it is like, it's almost like you have to peel back layers upon layers to get to the real thing that you getting the thing that you want will give you.
Yes.
And usually it's not rocket science. Most people, you talked about love at the get-go of this, or feel accepted. So some of those central themes are really what we operate on, but then we give them different names. A Mercedes, Volkswagen, but really what you might be looking for is respect and recognition. It might be such a core need of yours that you've not really articulated. And then if you take it a step further and just sort of play a flashback of your life and look at all the decisions and choices you've made, you may realize that that's one of the biggest central theme in what you do, whatever that ends up being, the big bucket that it sits under. And that should be a cause for revelation and excitement and discovery. But I think what we are in that Instagram generation, we are an Amazon Prime generation, that even 30 minutes of delivery is too late for us. And I'm going to raise my hand. I've ordered food, and literally 2 seconds later, I'm seeing whether it's left the facility.
Right.
So I think, that's why it's very important to surround ourselves with people. And I'm not trying to talk about not just age particularly, but you should try your best to surround yourself with people who are really not like you, were probably not raised like you. I've been very fortunate because I was born in India, but I was raised in Africa and England and the US, and I'm in India again, and I'll be back home, like the States again. Like all of this stuff, like my mosaic is, if you will, is the earth. Like I get to like put my feet everywhere I want to, and I want to create a life that allows me to do all of these things, whether it's my poetry or my consulting or whatever the words I use. I think my central base, like when I'm talking about that core thing, for me, it's freedom.
Yeah.
Freedom of choice, to be able to have a call like this it's almost 9 p.m. where I am, right? And this, right? Like, so whoever's listening to this, I had no idea I was just going to get recorded, and we're just having this conversation. How lucky am I? Like, I remember a time when I was in a corporate job where I was just looking around me and feeling completely weird and isolated and strange, because everyone around me seemed to be doing okay with coming into work day in and day out, and be okay with what they were doing, in terms of like they could have to deal with a toxic coworker and they know that the person is not in the right, or they'd have to deal with a client decision that's again not in their control, many things like that. And I would look at them and be like, so the big question for me back then was, is this what it's supposed to be? Like, this is what I'm supposed to be doing? Like, this is what the fuss is about? Like having this corporate job, having a 401k, blah, 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 whatever that list is. And I didn't like the answer. So I said, okay, I will step into the unknown versus being in the prison of my own making and my own choice. And I was able to call it a prison after many years of doing the same thing over and over again. So receptivity comes from also like giving it a name, and not being, like, it's almost like being very brutally honest to yourself.
Yeah.
Before everybody else.
So, and again, I just want to bring the listener in, because sometimes it's so easy to just hear a conversation and go about your day and think of something else. And I just want to ask the listener, do you have the courage to be that brutally honest? Do you have that courage to look at what you're doing and question some of the things that you're doing? Do you feel like you're living in a prison of your own mind, of your own making? And you have the capacity to break out of that prison by changing the way you think, the way you act. So maybe the end result of what you want changes, because maybe it's not about the money. maybe it's about happiness, and maybe your happiness will bring you money. Maybe the whole route changes in your GPS system of your own mind when you put a different destination in, and that destination can have all the things you want, but the destination is happiness, not money. And what does that look like for you? First of all, like, I love how honest you're being, and I love how you're just right here. And I want to take advantage of that with you a little bit by just asking you, for those people, like, one of my biggest sadnesses in my life is I look around the world and I don't see a lot of people that know themselves very well. I don't see people that are aware of what's going on. I see people that are caught in the treadmill of life. They're running and running and running to keep up. And you ask them, why are you running so hard? And they say, well, I have to run so hard because I have to keep up with what I'm doing. But they don't have time to stop and think because they don't really know themselves that well. First of all, what are your thoughts on that? Do you think that's true? Do you think that's not true? Tell me what you think.
So I think we're at a better point in the human history of having more people elevate and be more open and receptive, because there's just like this influx of like all kinds of spiritual teachers and teachings, and everyone's listening. There's God speak coming back into the space, right? But there are wars around it. There have always been wars around ideology, right? So
Yes.
that's always going to be there as part of our human narrative, if you will. The thing I always bring myself back to is I am the lighthouse. I will always try to be the lighthouse. And all I'm going to do is stand there and shine whatever I can in the moment. And whoever it is meant to receive it now, or 10 years later, or 20 years later, or 50 years later, they will find it. The most important thing I can do as the lighthouse, if you will, is to just make sure I show up. I don't let any of my judgments come into play. I try to be as sincere and honest as I possibly can in any given moment. Where what that basically for me that means is I don't have anything that corrupts what I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
So I don't want to edit myself. I want to be kind and compassionate. I don't necessarily need to be nice, but I will be kind and compassionate, but I will tell you the truth, because I don't know how else to do life. And I think that's a level of comfort that I've always had with myself. And I've been very fortunate with that. I won't lie. I've been very fortunate. So I think one big part of this, right? Be the lighthouse, do the thing that you're meant to do, and someone will get benefit for it whenever the time is right for them, for their awakening, their journey. I just truly believe that to be true. And the second part of it is, and I've had to say this to myself repeatedly, because I see a lot of things where I'm just like, if only, if only. And the answer to that is, I am nobody's savior. Even if I was a doctor with a degree, I am nobody's savior. I am human. I might be a little ahead in some part of my journey. I'm definitely behind in some other part of my journey. I'd rather focus on where I want to go, the person I want to be, so that I can be utilized in the best way possible in this lifetime for what was given for me to do in this lifetime. Totally. That's all I have to do. That's it.
So as the lighthouse that you are, and first of all, I love what you're saying, because it so resonates with me, and I'm sure it resonates with readers. Why I keep saying readers, listeners. As the lighthouse that you are, what is the light that you feel is most important for you to shine on the world that's around you?
You know what? I struggle with a couple of things. So I still continue to. I'm highly introverted. Even the closest people around me think I'm extroverted. I stay in my mind a lot. I would rather be with a book and a dog and a cup of tea, or the ocean splashing somewhere, or a mountain range behind me. I'm quite content with that, to be honest. But I think to be a lighthouse, it's important not to let that story stop me from doing the things that I need to do for the people that are looking for someone like me.
Yeah.
Right. So I think the simplest way to say that is, like, I do my best on a daily basis to take care of my personal energetic levels and what I want to build, of course. But I also do my best to make sure that I show up, because I don't know what I might say. And I do get this. I'm sure this happens to you too, where someone will meet you after like, I don't know, a year or something, or someone will send you a message and be like, hey, listen, I was listening to this one thing you said. I was in the room when you were speaking and doing that talk. And I really appreciated it. It came up for me, and I'll be like, that's great. I just don't remember I said that. But great, right? So, so with my three N's, right? Like Niyati, Niyam, and Niti, the last N is like the N factor, which is the Neelam factor, which I just joke about. And I'm like, the Neelam factor is N of one. I'm N of one. I'm Neelam, and these are the ways. This is the way I would like to live. And I hope that whether the room has 2 people in it, or 20,000 people in it, or 2,000 people in it, or 200 people in it, I just hope one person in that crowd feels heard, feels understood, feels as if they're not alone. Yeah. My job is done. But I can't have an agenda. Despite knowing I have the N of one criteria, I can't have even that agenda when I'm doing my thing.
Yeah.
Ever.
So, but your image of a lighthouse is beautiful in that way, because the lighthouse stands where it is. It's isolated. It's not around other things. It has lots of space, but it just casts its light out, and people that can see it and use it as a guidepost to get to where they're going. So I love the image of how, because it so fits the persona of who you believe you are. My question is really another question. That light that you shine, what's in that light? What is it that you want people to see in the light that you shine?
I think I want people to know that that there can be pain, but there can also be joy. It's as simple as that. Like, you can't have only one thing in life. I would hate life, and this is going to sound ridiculous, but I would hate life if there was no spectrum and there was no, dimensionality to it. It would be ridiculous for me. I mean, I don't think my personality is well suited for that either. So like a regular routine wouldn't work for me anyway. So I think pain and joy both. I hope people see that I've been through an immense amount of pain. Maybe it's not like everybody else's. I've been very fortunate in many ways. I've got very loving, supporting parents and family and friends that are fantastic to me. But I do feel the pain of like creation, the pain of, the burden that comes with knowing, hey, this is a finite amount of time. How are you going to choose to use it? Hey, creating this piece of work or this body of work is going to require these many months. There's pain that goes with it, there's sacrifice that goes with it. And sometimes you don't feel understood. And living with that is just important. Like, I think people should know that they should not strive to be understood, but maybe create a deeper understanding of themselves more than anything else. And the rest would align itself to where you are at.
Yeah. I personally think it's such a blessing not to be understood. Because when I'm not understood, it means I haven't made things simple enough for people to understand them. And so it's one thing to have knowledge and want to give knowledge. It's a completely different thing to be able to communicate that knowledge or that feeling or that humanness of who I am in a way that touches the hearts of another human being. And so I love when I'm not understood, because it just sends me back to the drawing board and says, hey, you know what? How could I say this in a different way? And can I tell you a very intimate story?
Of course, anytime.
I've had the opportunity to be with some of the greatest teachers in the world, both financial and inspirational. I've sat at their dinner tables. I've sat with them and met their parents and played on the floor with their kids. I've also sat with some of the poorest people in the world, people that no one would go to, and I've learned from them incredible, incredible lessons, because I sat with them and just listened to them tell me their stories. But the person I've learned the most from probably is my daughter. And my daughter's about to turn 31. She's developmentally delayed. And she doesn't speak like you and I speak. And when she speaks, people don't understand her. And she's taught me that there's always a way to communicate. When people don't understand, there's always a way to say what you want to say in a way that you want to do it. She started out first by, when I didn't understand, she would yell, thinking that I didn't hear. When I didn't understand her yell, she would tantrum, thinking she was just, I want to just create a big enough scene that you hear me and listen to me and see me. And when that didn't work, she would attack me. And that went on for a long time until in the midst of her rage, she was running towards me. And I said, Elisa, we can't do this anymore. I love you. You know, I love you more than anything in the whole world. And I want to listen to you and hear you more than I want to hear anything, but I can't understand your words. Can you find another way without words to communicate to me? And she stopped dead in her tracks. Smile came to her face. And she said, I am, Daddy. And I said, what the hell do you mean you are, Daddy? Like, how are you doing that? How come I don't know that? How are you doing that? And she took her finger and she pointed to the side of her head. And I said, you little son of a gun, have you been putting thoughts into my head? I thought you were doing that. I thought I heard you. I thought I was feeling what you were feeling. I just didn't trust it because I didn't even know you were capable of thinking those thoughts. Because when you didn't speak, I didn't know if you were able to think those types of thoughts. But now I get it. She started laughing absolutely uncontrollably. And her joy of finally being understood was so amazing. And what I realized is that everybody I know does the same thing. When they speak and they don't get heard, they yell. When they yell and they don't get heard, they create a scene. When they create a scene and they don't get heard, they destroy. That could be a marriage, a building. They could shoot up people in a square. That could be a business that their partner's trying to make. That could be a reputation. But we all do the same thing because we all just are desperately wanting to be heard. We do it to our own selves. Our bodies do it to us. Our environment does it to us. And so what do you think about listening? What's the biggest thing that's come to you as a result of listening?
I think the biggest thing would have been just this raw connection with, or rather raw connection, maybe raw, if alchemy can be raw, where you're able to synthesize all these other things that are going on around you, and you can bring it to the bare bones of what's going on, and I think the thing for me when I see things like, because I try to help people get to the next place, right?
Yeah.
And then when I see, like, for example, if I see an operational inefficiency, it gets under my skin. It really does. And then I'll have to like sit back and be like, okay, is this how I'm choosing to communicate this forward? Or can I be both an example and also say what I want? And I usually err for the side of the second, right? Because if I'm just going at it like, don't do it this way, like I would never say that, but you know what I mean. I try to explain. I think I try my best to do things in a way that I wish were done with me. I wish I was taught a certain way, right? Like in school, teachers and all of that. And I don't think even school was the right environment for someone like me. No, not for any other reason, but that I didn't enjoy school. I didn't enjoy that structure.
Yeah.
But it's okay. And I'm not, I'm not, I have no lack of gratitude for it because my dad came from extreme poverty. He had to make ends meet. His family had to make ends meet. My granddad was a watchman, right? In India, right? Like just think about that situation. And my dad knew his way out was education. So while his dad pulled in 2 jobs in roles that I can't even imagine myself in, right? I'd be horrible at them, first of all. But they had they did all of these things. And for my dad, the currency was education. That was the way out, right?
Yeah.
But so when I look at myself, I was like, but I could have been an exception to that rule because of the way I'm constructed. And I have to be very careful about how I say it because I think I'm most understood by my dad. And just think, right? Like South Asian girl living by herself, traveling the world, doing her own thing. It's like a big no-no in some cultures.
Yeah, totally.
Enjoying her single life and whatever it is, right? Because I think I've never ever felt separate from the whole. I've never felt unwhole either because I've always been able to fulfill my own dreams and desires. And I'm not talking about independence. I'm not talking about that because a lot of the work I do is co-creation. I build with others. So I'm not, like the Western embodiment of like the independent woman. Like I never like to even, I don't even like the words boss babe and things like that. I'm like, not really. If you saw the number of times I fail just before I get started in the morning, you would be shocked that I even get anything done in the day. So communication, I'm sorry, I have to take a jab at myself over there because seriously, I think the only thing is I probably stick to some things longer than most people would, and I just have heart in service. I've always been that way, and I've always believed that, I would want to leave something a little better than how I found it.
Neelam, give us an idea of what you do, because we jumped right in and nobody has any idea who you are and what you really do. So tell us what you
Let's
do.
leave it that way. Let's leave it that way, because I'm so shy about talking about what I do.
You haven't been shy. Come on. Because what I want to do next is I want to set it up so that if people can want to get in touch with you, they have a way to do that. And you're going to send me all your social media links and your website and your headshot. But I want to let people, I am sure that people have fallen in love with you through this conversation. And I'm sure they're going to want to have more conversation with you. And so as a result of that, I just want them to have an idea of what that conversation might be about, or what you might be able to offer to them in that conversation as a lighthouse.
This is where all the things I say will get negated with what I do. Just kidding. So I'll just set it up in one way. So I've worked in corporate America out of New York City for a little over a decade in the ad business, and I always loved the ideas of telling stories more impactfully and strategically, and building something around that. So a lot of work I do is around consulting, and I consult with high 6-7 figure earners to help them, the thing we were talking about earlier, do things the right way.
Yes.
To go back to the basics, and I look at their entire model. And these people come from the financial world. They come from, they're artists, they're entertainers, they're producers, all kinds of people who come to work with me. And I had someone who told me, who didn't know me well enough a while back, said so do you want to be a you know how people pitch you, right? Sometimes.
Right.
So he's like, oh, but so you want to just be a well-kept secret? And in my head, I was like, yeah, I'd rather be that. I don't have a problem with it. I'd rather just be around people that I really enjoy working with, that I know they can quietly build their outside world in a way that they can create massive impact, because their audience is not exactly my audience all the time.
Yeah.
So I always look at, in the work I do, I look at, okay, if someone's coming to me for, let's say, business strategy and consulting, I look at, okay, if we rejiggered a couple of things that they're doing in this way, could they reach more people in their world so that they could change the kind of systems and structures and the toxicity that exists in that world? So it's a little bit of activism, but it's not as overt, if that makes sense.
Right. Totally.
If that makes sense. I know it makes sense to you. So I love consulting, and I think, I love going in there and taking things apart, putting them back together in a way that lets my clients really start focusing on the kind of impact they want to have. Because in most ways, they're masters of their craft and what they do. Now it's taking a lot of that and putting the right, nuts and bolts in place so that they can start functioning in the same way, and so that they can just really go crazy, whether it's in their own vertical, like if you're in the financial world, and you come to me, I'll be like, all right, let's find some way that you could shape things up differently so that there's some air in that space, right?
Yeah.
Because I think one thing I will say just really quick to anybody who's listening, and if it's worth anything, is I feel that across the board, and I've been saying this for, I think, almost 2 years now, and whether you look at it politically, economically, you look at it across the board, if you look at the big verticals that are around, so if you look at healthcare as one vertical, you look at politics as one vertical, you look at the government as one vertical, the big ones that are systemic, right? There's systems around it. Those things are crumbling right now.
Yeah, totally.
And right, so if they're crumbling, that means someone needs to catch it the right way so that the new stuff starts evolving, so that this generation that's coming in, I look at someone who is 2 or 3 year old now, is not going to resonate with anything we've actually created right now. It's not going to work. So we have to be the people who are going to be, so to speak, the elders or the ancients of our own lifetime, so that we can help embody a lot of that. So I try to do that, and I do speaking. I go into corporate structures and do talks and sessions, and I do all kinds of things. I want this to stop.
So, and I'm sure all that would be on a website. You have a website that will tell people more about what you do, which is, if people are interested, they can go there.
Google. Yeah, you can search my name. You'll find I don't like saying you can Google me, but you can. So you check neelamtewar.com, and that should take you to the right places. And if
And
you're reaching out,
we'll list all those in the show notes also, so people don't have to Google you. So
that I don't have to
right there.
also talk about, so that I don't have to talk about it.
You don't have to talk about all that. But I wanted people to get a sense of who you are and what you do so that they would know. And what she does is so important. Let me just sort of put a context in this. I've been involved with a lot of businesses and grown a lot of businesses with them. And what works when you're first starting out doesn't continue to work as you keep going, because as you go faster and faster, some of the loose nuts and bolts that were not important when you were going slow or didn't seem to be important now become incredibly important, because as you move quicker, they start to, the whole car starts to rattle. And unless you have someone who can align your vehicle to the speed that you're going and prepare it for the next speeds that are coming, you'll probably disintegrate the vehicle. And you see that happening as so many businesses grow. They keep operating in the way they started, but not transforming to what they have to become, and they fall apart and crash. So to have someone to be able to come in and watch that trajectory and be able to help align you in the right way with that trajectory, and also revolutionize and disrupt the trajectory of how you're going, so that you can actually have a new experience of that, and you can create yourself in a new way that shows the world a new way of doing what people have always done is super important. So I really want to recommend that you look up Neelam. I will have all of her links in the show notes. And
I also recommend that Daniel always talks about what I do versus me, because I did clearly such a, can I say shit on the show? Like,
you can say anything you want.
Okay, cool. I did such a shitty job because I hate it. I just hate talking about it. The funniest thing with me is that I usually get the cutest, funnest introductions. Like, I usually get this. Anytime someone comes to want to work with me, we'll always say, I was just told to reach out to you, and this is the person. And that's what I was told, that I had to speak to you. And I think that's okay, right?
That's great. That's great. And like, I want people that are listening, because this is so important, and this is so real, and this is so vulnerable, and this is so raw. And I hope you don't mind me sharing you in this way. I want people to see how someone who is so confident and so sure and so beautiful in talking about what they do, when it comes time to talk about what they do, becomes a little less that way and doesn't like doing it because she has whatever story she has. And it's not really true. It's just a story that she has that is there from somewhere else, because she loves what she does and can tell you in a minute what she does. But I want to ask the listener, how do you do that? How do you like, when someone really wants to know what you do, how do you not be able to tell them, or need somebody else to tell them for you, rather than just say, bam, this is what I am, and I love what I do, and I love the idea that we could work together and I could help you do this, because you already felt it in what she's saying. So having it not be there when I ask is something that is really not just unique to Neelam, it's unique to everybody. And I want you to find in yourself where you do that, because that is keeping you from being bigger than you can be. And in Neelam's case, she's happy because she wants to be with a certain group of people, and they may not want to grow bigger. But I actually, when I go inside you, I don't feel that's the reality.
No, it isn't. But I was just going to say that I got what did I get? Like a C- on that question?
No, what you got was an A, because of how real and like what happened is, even in those moments, those are the best teaching moments that you can show, because when people see somebody as confident, as well prepared as you are in the work that you do, come to that place and then have that not come across that way, it gives them hope that they're not the only ones that feel that. And I think it's just real. I'm 65 years old. I've got a few years on you. And when I go and tell in terms of selling myself to somebody, quote unquote, I completely change and I fall apart and I don't like it at all because I feel like a prostitute sitting on a street selling my wares. And I don't like to do that. I like to just be having a conversation. If you like what I do, you come and join me. If you don't like what I do, then you just, go find somebody else. There are millions of people that can do stuff for you, right? So I want to thank you for taking the time to be with us. I want to thank you for the surprise of thinking this was going to be a pre-interview of a show and then just showing up and being spontaneous enough to let that happen.
Same time tomorrow?
Same time. I personally would love that. I would love same time tomorrow all the time. Any more conversations with you would be my honor. I want to thank people who have come and listened to the show for listening. If you enjoy the show, I want you to contact Neelam. And I want you to just reach out and just start a dialogue, see what happens. I also want you, if you like the show, to tell people you like about the show. Because that's what we do when we go to a restaurant we tell people about it. We tell our friends, you got to go to this restaurant. Well, when we see a show that we like, why not tell them about that too? Share strangers with strangers. So share strangers with friends so that strangers become friends together. In the world that we live in, when we maintain the atmosphere that people are strange, we live in a strange world. When we change that, how long did it take? Neelam was in this room, 45 minutes? And I knew her a little bit from before, but I didn't really know that much about her. There is a big desire for me to continue the friendship with her and to speak more and to not let this end here, but let this begin. So how long did it take to make a stranger a friend, or to have a stranger become a friend? Because nobody made anybody do anything. I want to invite you all and challenge you all to go up to someone you don't know and invite them into your life by asking them just simply, how are you? What's going on? You don't need to change them. You don't need to fix them. You don't need to uplift them. You don't need to do anything to them. All you need to do is hold the space for them to tell you who they are and just love and accept them. Listen to them and hear them and acknowledge and validate them for what they're doing. The world could use more friends. And one by one, we can make more friends. Neelam, before we head out, is there anything you want to say before we go?
I would just say, just forgive yourself. If you're listening to this, please forgive yourself for something you have done, haven't done, or chose not to do possibly. Just forgive yourself. Try not to be too harsh with your little heart. Your heart is very precious and it sees everything you're doing to it. Just be very kind to yourself. The world is filled with people who can put us down. We can't be part of that band. We can't join with them. We have to support ourselves and try our best to be our own best friends. And I always just say one thing, like when you find it difficult to be kind to yourself, just pretend as if you're talking to a child. What would you do with a child? So treat yourself with that kind of loving care, attention that you obviously deserve, because the fact that you're here means that there's still things that you can explore, experience, and evolve into. So it's not really the end of anything. Whatever is going on with you right now, even if things are fantastic, please know there's another level. And if things are not fantastic, please know there's another level.
I love it. I love it. In Judaism, they said King Solomon used to wear a ring, and it had 3 letters on it. It had a gimel, a zion, and a yud. And it meant Gam ze yavod, this too will pass. And so in his darkest moments, he would look at his ring and he would realize, gosh, this will pass. And in his brightest moments, he would look at the ring and see, this too will pass. And so I love what you're saying, because it's filled with the wisdom of many ages, of many different religions, of many different beliefs. Thank you again for being here. Thank you, listeners, for being here. Until the next stranger comes into the room, make the world a friendly place. Love yourself, love each other. Forgive yourself, forgive each other. Everything that you do for yourself, do for each other. And everything you do for each other, do for yourself. I think you'll find that world a very powerful, compassionate, kind, loving place to live in. I invite you to live in that space. Until next time, God bless, be connected, be kind. Ciao.